joining us. I'm your host, Ken Ladden, and you're watching Citywide TV. I want you all to listen up. We have a really great and an interesting show here for you, and I think it's going to help you. We're going to talk about step families. Now, if you're part of a traditional family, that's not a bad thing, but you're probably one of the few. Most people are now in step families. We're going to talk about, some issues involving, step families, children, and perhaps how you can deal with them. And I have some great people on the show, and they're going to talk about being step parents and how things are working out for them, and perhaps to help you to be better at making your marriages work and your families kind of work together and make it a wholesome living environment for everyone. So let me thank all of you all for coming on. We have Gayla Grace, who we're going to start with. Tell me a little bit about, we talk about, step families. We hear so much about, the blended family. Is there a difference between a step family and a blended family?
The terms are used interchangeably. You hear both. You hear blended families, sometimes meaning there's kids from both sides. Maybe the husband and the wife bring kids in, but they are used interchangeably. You will hear the term step family probably used more often than blended families now.
Right. And as I was saying in the introduction, traditional family where, the mother and the father are parents of the same children in the house, and the children in the house, both parents are, their biological parents. We're seeing fewer and fewer of those households now.
That's correct.
Right.
Traditional families are actually the minority now.
Right.
So you definitely see more step families, more single parent homes that have totally different dynamics.
Okay. Are we saying divorce perhaps is one of the reasons? Because we know we have in the United States anyway, we have a really high divorce rate. I'm thinking 50% or so. It could even be higher in some age levels, but we're talking about divorce and people remarrying.
That's right.
Okay.
Primarily divorce. Certainly you have death that contributes to that some.
Okay.
You also have some that come into an unwed pregnancy possibly that could result in a step family situation.
Right.
But primarily it's going to be divorce, and then the remarriage, and then oftentimes there's a re-divorce sometimes even after remarriage because of the challenges, and that's where we're trying to help to prevent the a re-divorce.
Right, yeah. And I think this is really great, and it's a ministry that Gayla does at our church, First Baptist in Bossier. Dr. Fred Lavish, your pastor.
That's
great.
correct.
I always enjoy it. But what made you really wanted to become a part of this? I mean, this has to be your ministry, your gift that God has given you to help other families out there who may struggle, have the issues of, coming together, bringing in children from other marriages, and really wanting to make it, a good environment for the family. Because when you remarry, you're hoping things are going to really go great and the children are going to get along. But, in reality, sometimes that's, easier said than done.
Exactly, and I think that's what happened with my husband Randy and I. We married 17 years ago, and each of us brought 2 children into the marriage. We were both divorced. I had 2 young girls. He had a daughter and a son. And so we were blending 4 children that were ages 10 and under. And it was more challenging than we ever anticipated. And we didn't do everything right, and as a result, we just seemed to have obstacles, and we joined a step family group that was meeting at a local church nearby, and that group was instrumental in us beginning to understand the differences within a step family, and the different ways to parent, and the different ways to interact with your step kids. And that group is probably part of what saved our marriage at that time.
Great.
And as a result of that, as we have walked the journey and our kids are older now, Randy and I both have a passion to help other step parents see that there is hope, even if you are walking through some real difficult days or even difficult years. It doesn't mean that you have to get stuck there and that you can be another statistic. That's what we're trying to prevent. And so that's where our passion came from, was to really help step parents, for one, become better educated, because there are definitely things you can do that are going to help your family, your step family, grow emotionally, spiritually, and have a better chance at success. There's other things you can do that are going to hurt your step family. So we just have a passion to help step parents understand.
And we appreciate, we have Holly and Jeremy, who've just been talking so much. I can't get a word in edgewise with Jeremy. Thank you all for coming on. Now, you've been married about, you said, 4 months.
4 months.
So tell us about, so you all both have been married before?
I was married before, and I became a widow almost 6 years ago, and left me with two very small children, and spent some time alone and struggled being a single mother, and then I found Jeremy.
And I had been married before and had 2 small girls also.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
And so when you meet, you know, we hear sometimes it's, you know, comical, you hear on the TV like, don't bring the kids out yet, I just met this guy, I just met this girl, you know, keep the kids in the back. I don't want them to know, you know, that I have kids. So how do you handle that? I mean, does that come out, because you may be helping somebody, does that come out immediately, or do you kind of get a feel for?
Well, in my situation, being a widow and having my children with me all the time,
so,
he had to meet my kids
so he's
immediately.
Right. Okay.
Just very soon, within a couple weeks of dating, and since the beginning we were that way. We always had our children together because that was one thing that we wanted to make sure that they could get along well together, because they're 9, 8, 8, and 6.
Oh, Lord. Oh.
3 girls and 1 boy.
Right.
So,
okay. Well, let me ask this: what do you wish you had known before you remarried?
I wish I would have known to not have such high expectations in the beginning. Because they get knocked down really fast.
Okay,
the first, like, we never had a fight for the whole year and a half of us dating, and then as soon as we got married, and the next day we're moving all of our stuff in together, and it was just, we started fighting from that point forward. So, and my expectations were just so high. You have to bring that down, or else you'll get disappointed.
What about you, Jeremy? And do you say you have how many boys, how many girls?
1 boy and 3 girls.
And who has this? What did you have?
I have both girls. She has the boy, and he's the 6-year-old. He's the baby.
Okay. So how was that different coming together with her children and your children?
Well, I think when we first got married, it was. We expected things to be like when we were dating, but I think when you're dating and the kids start arguing or whatever, you can just go to your house and separate things and it's over with. But
just go home at night and you get your break at that point.
In a marriage, the kids, when you're actually together, the kids never really separate, and they tend to wear on each other a little bit more than they did when in a dating relationship.
And we're on us.
Well, I guess, Gail, the question is, because I'm sure we're talking to the majority of people out there, if you're in a family, because we just said traditional families are certainly on the decline, and so most households now are step families. But I think one of the biggest problems we have is, how do you discipline your spouse's children? I'm sure, because I hear it all the time, you know, she yelled at me, but she didn't say anything to her children, or he yelled at me, but he didn't say anything to his children. You know, the favoritism or a lack of showing, you know, being, I guess, even-sided with everybody.
Well, and one of the biggest mistakes that step-parents often make is they come in and they try to start disciplining right away and treating it as if it was a biological home. And without a relationship developed with that stepchild, you really need to step back from doing the disciplining. And in the beginning, you need to really allow the biological parent to do the disciplining of their child. So in our case, where Randy and I both brought 2 kids into the marriage, then I focused on my 2 kids in regards to discipline. He focused on his 2 kids. And that way, it allows the step-parent to build a relationship before they have to step into that role of being a disciplinarian. So that is definitely something to consider, is don't jump in to feeling like you have to discipline. Now, there's going to be cases, oftentimes as a stepmom, you may have your kids in the afternoon, say before the dad comes home from work. And if you're home alone with the stepkids, certainly you are going to need to step into that disciplinary role. But when possible, really allow the biological parent to take more of the disciplinary position until the relationship is really built.
Right. And Holly, is that perhaps what you and Jeremy do? Because if there's a problem with his children, would you say, well, you know, Jeremy, I need you to talk to, you know, your child about this, and vice versa? Jeremy says, Holly, you know, I need you to talk to your child about this. Is that the way you all handle it pretty much so?
Yes, I don't discipline his girls, and I just feel at this point it's not my place, because when we're all together, we do everything together, so he's always there.
Right.
But at Christmas time, we were on vacation, and we were having a lot of difficulties with the children acting up back and forth, blaming each other and stuff. And it's hard to have like Jeremy discipline my children because you want to protect them. Even though he's like their father, you still want to protect him. And my mother was just sitting back in the wings watching, and she said, you know, in my situation, my kids don't have an earthly father anymore.
Right.
So she said, you're just going to have to step back and just let him take it all. And he was more than happy doing that. So I just usually let him discipline, and we haven't had any real problems since.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, Gayla, probably a lot of people don't talk about these things beforehand. They just expect them to work out. When these are conversations you probably should have before you get married, just like you talk about your finances, or you may talk about religion, or you may talk about, your job or whatever, those kinds of things. But you need to talk about how we're going to really make this work, because when you're going with different, children from different, marriages, it's always that step. Just the word step is always, a bad connotation for most people, anything that's step. And so these are conversations you should have prior to it. But you shouldn't let the child determine whether you marry someone that you love. Am I right?
No,
okay.
No. I do think that the more time that you can give for the child to become acquainted with who's going to be their new step-parent, that can certainly help. But definitely, and if you do premarital counseling, it needs to be with somebody who understands step-family dynamics.
Right.
Because not all pastors do, not all counselors can adequately counsel step-families. The dynamics are completely different.
Okay.
And so those are the things that step-parents need to really be aware of, is are you working with someone who understands step-family dynamics?
Right, okay. All right, we're going to take a break. I see Holly wants to say something. We're going to take a break. This is a very good show, and like I said at the beginning, if you're watching this show, you're probably part of a step-parent, or you're in a step-family. And what we're trying to do is really, make your lives easier, and that your family can be a loving family where everyone, gets along. There are no perfect families, even in the traditional family. There are no, we have our problems as well. So we'll take a break and we'll talk a little bit more about the step family.
Hey there. Yes, you. I'm going to give you a snap quiz. Oh, don't worry, it's not going to count toward your grades. Okay, let's see if you're required to register with the Selective Service, okay? First, are you under 18 years old or over 25? Are you on active military duty or enrolled in West Point or one of the other service academies? Are you a student in an ROTC program at the Citadel, Virginia Military Institute, North Georgia College, Norwich University, Virginia Polytechnic, or Texas A&M? Well, that's it. You passed with a perfect score of 0. Any of these situations would have been an exception to the law requiring young men to register with a Selective Service. Virtually all men living in the United States must register when they turn 18. Go to www.sss.gov and register.
Welcome to Cook It Safe Challenge, where teams compete to make the right decisions about safe food preparations. Our challenge in this round, read and follow package cooking instructions and use a food thermometer. Let's see how our teams are doing so far. Team 1.
We just got 100 points. We separated our raw food from our cooked food.
Team 2.
We got a 100-point green card for proper hand washing before our meal prep.
We've reached a critical safety point in the challenge. Okay, Team 1, let's check this out. Uh-oh, not a safe internal temperature for those hamburgers. That puts everyone at high risk for foodborne illness. You get a red card, undercooked. Always read and follow the package cooking instructions and use a food thermometer. Let's see how our winning team cooked it safe and avoided problems.
Well, I just kept focused on the 4 food safety steps: clean, separate, cook, and chill.
And we followed the package cooking instructions and took the temperature.
Can you cook it safe?
All right, if you're just joining us, this show may help, save your marriage and save your family. Again, it may help save your marriage and save your family. We're talking about step families or step parents. And I know if you're a part of a family, you know, we all have our issues. You know, I have a traditional family, thank God, you know. But for those who don't, you know, you have your issues just as we do, but we're talking on the show really, you know, how to make those families come together and the way you should handle things. And I really like the idea of that, you know, each parent should talk to their own child in the remarriage relationship, because that just makes it easier. And then you don't have to deal with, you know, someone disliking you probably more than they should or more than they do anyway, until you really grow and bond, and then you're even comfortable to say to your husband's child or your wife's child, you know, to discipline them for that. So that's one of the things that you really express, that you be careful, you know, the way that you discipline your spouse's child.
Yes, because otherwise it can just take longer for the relationship to grow, to bond between the step-parent and the stepchild.
Right.
So it definitely eases the relationships to develop better by stepping back from the discipliner.
Right. Holly, you had some comments before we went to the break. What did you want to say?
We were speaking on like counseling before remarriage, and Jeremy and I, we attend First Baptist Bossier, and on Wednesday nights they offered a Smart Step Family class.
Oh, okay.
So we started going to that a few months before we had gotten married, and it just really prepared us for what we were entering into. And it's funny, we joke about it, that once I started reading the book and started hearing all the problems and everything that you're going to go through, I was so scared to get married to him, but we knew that we wanted to be married. It was just going to be difficult in a step family.
Right.
Because I think that one of the statistics you all gave us was that 70% of remarriages do not survive. Right. And when I saw that statistic, it just floored me.
Right. And the reason they don't survive, is it because of mostly trying to integrate children from both marriages? I mean, some of it, I'm sure, is not all of it, just like those who are traditionally married, 50% or so divorced, and we're parents of the same children. So, but I'm thinking that's probably some of it.
That's part of it,
right.
But you also have the additional dynamic oftentimes with an ex-spouse that is in the picture, and it depends on the relationship with that ex-spouse also. That can bring in a additional dynamic that can be hard for the step family. The thing that is challenging is oftentimes if you are divorced from your spouse, you divorced because you couldn't get along, you didn't like each other for whatever reason. Okay, but now you're in this step family, you still have these children that you need to co-parent with, and you need to co-parent with in an amicable relationship with someone who you may not like. Right. And so that's where the paradox lies.
I can see that.
And beginning to really work on that relationship.
And people have to understand, I say this all the time, and I haven't dealt with it, so I'm probably not the best person to say it, but I've seen it enough that you still have to be cordial to your husband or wife, you know, their ex. I mean, we call it the baby mama drama. Did they call it that in your class? I can't see it at church saying you got baby mama drama.
I have an ex-wife-in-law.
Okay, all right. Right. But you have to still deal with those, and I think one of the problems with that is that sometimes people don't respect their spouse's ex.
And you don't realize how much
you don't have to like them. I say respect.
Right. And you don't realize how much that ex can still play into your own family. And that's where we joke about her having an ex-wife-in-law. You know, my husband's ex, certainly, and my ex-spouse had some control within the family simply because trying to negotiate visitation schedules and holidays and summer breaks and all those things that are going to be additional complications that you have to be able to work through with your ex-spouse. Right.
Jeremy, what are some of the challenges you see now? I know you haven't been married a long time, but she talks about the holidays and all of that. Is your wife very involved in your children?
Yes, Holly's very involved.
I mean,
I think some of the...
I meant your ex-wife, I'm sorry. Ex-wife.
She is.
Okay.
I think that's a lot of the challenges we face is we have her children all the time because she's a widow. Right. But we only have my children about 40% of the time. So I think some of the issues, some of the biggest issues we face are fairness between, you know, my kids went and did this, and, maybe we did or didn't go do something, or what they have and what they get, and how it's not fair that my kids got to have Christmas at 2 houses and her kids only got to have Christmas at 1 house. It seems like it's really hard to keep things fair.
Right. And they're young too,
and
so
it's impossible.
They get gifts for both houses, 2 places. Right.
So it's impossible to keep vacations and all that kind of stuff fair between the 2 sets of children. So that brings on quite a bit of stress. And it's oddly not as much between the children as it is between us. So
you all, Holly, you pretty much thought about how you're going to do that. You have been married at least 1 Christmas, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So now you have to decide, when it's coming up to holidays, as hard as it is for traditional families to decide, how do you spend the holiday with, your wife's parents for a while and your parents for a while. And luckily, because our parents both live here, we do half a day, which works out, well. But everybody doesn't have, that luxury of having both parents living in the same city. So what's your consensus? What conclusions have you all come up with for making it run smoothly?
What have we done?
Well,
you all supposed to know that. We don't want to get in an argument about that.
Neither one of our parents are here.
Okay.
So that would mean that with the split custody, that is very unlikely that we'll ever go out of town anywhere for Christmas. So that's a tough pill to swallow. Hey, I'm not going to be able to go to either, my dad's house in North Carolina or her family in Kentucky or Arizona. So that's you just got to make some concessions and understand that that's how things are going to be and live with it.
Gail, what are some of the challenges that you face? And you've been pretty, upfront talking about the challenges, and how have you overcome them? Because people out there are saying, I'm just ready to, pull out my hair. I can't get my husband's children to cooperate. Everything I say, everything I do, they're against me. They talk negatively about me to their father, and he gets mad and upset with me, and he blames me, and vice versa with the mother. So it's a back and forth thing for some relationships. How do you overcome that?
Well, I think you step back and you look at it that this is a long-term relationship that you're building. It's not something that you're going to expect is going to happen overnight. And you're going to realize that parenting in this home is going to be different than it would be in a traditional home. And you're going to make sacrifices, like Jeremy said. You really have to accept there are going to be some concessions that you have to make if it's going to work. And so you look at the big picture more than looking at the small picture. And where are we going long term? What can I do to really build this relationship long term? Even if it means there's some bumps today. Figure out how to get through those bumps, knowing that you're looking at the long haul. And that, I think, helps. The lowering expectations, Holly talked about that. That's another one. That you recognize that relationships aren't going to bond. In fact, the research shows it takes 4 to 7 years for relationships in a step family to really begin to grow and everybody feel comfortable with one another. And so don't expect it even within the first year or 2. It doesn't mean that there won't be some good times and some blessings during that period, but you may take 1 step forward and 2 steps backward. And you just have to keep plowing through.
And I guess it has to be some really great communication between the husband and the wife. Because sometimes children will kind of pit you against each other. Children are smart, and they know who they can go to and who they can talk to the other one about, and so you have to really come together and talk about it. I'm sure you've had to deal with that.
We are still working on that today. We are still working. He's the leader. He'll step into the bedroom and say, hey, come in here for a minute. Let's discuss this.
Well, that's good. That's good.
And that's true. One of the damaging things that you can do is really to try to have those husband-wife conversations in front of the kids. When you do need to step back and say, hey, I don't necessarily agree with the way you just reacted to that situation. But you can definitely do damage to the relationships with the kids if the kids watch all of this that takes place and they see that you're not on the same page and they see you're not united. So some of that is going to need to be done behind closed doors.
What about, you have some great questions. I'm sure we won't be able to cover, you know, everything. But when you talk about the step families and those out there, and again, we really want to help, you know, families to become, you know, closer and to be able to enjoy, you know, one another. It shouldn't be, you know, that you regret the time that you met, that I didn't know all this was going to come apart, but it's really about, you know, working it out. Now, for a traditional family, the few that are out there, yeah, the few traditional families that are out there, because believe me, just about everybody I know, you know, has been married or widowed or remarried, or they're separated, or, you know, they're even, some people are even keeping their spouses' children, but they're not together. I mean, it's just kind of, all kind of strange, you know, family relationships. So somebody who's in a traditional family, how does that differ than someone who's in a step family?
Well, some of it we've already talked about in regards to the way you parent.
Right.
So certainly you do step back a little bit as a step parent. The different dynamics, even what we haven't talked about, are grandparents. You have step grandparents and grandparents.
And step uncles and aunts.
Yes.
And step
and so there's a conglomeration of people trying to figure out how to do relationships in this new family.
Right.
And sometimes grandparents aren't always fair with the step grandchild.
Right,
And so then you have a biological child or a stepchild that's watching this, and again, you can have hurt feelings.
Right. That's what I was, go ahead, Holly, that's a really great point, because I know some families where the grandparents were well off, one of the children, but the other child from the spouse, they were not. And so this grandparent with this child with everything, and the other child didn't understand, because, you know, if you're 5 or 6 years old, you don't really understand, why is my stepsister getting all this and I'm not getting anything. So let's take a break, but we're going to let you speak after. But those are things I think you have to consider. But then sometimes grandparents have to believe, to me, I believe they should just try to work on, if you're going to give one child something, at least bring the other child something else. I know biologically, you know, blood is thicker than water.
Yes.
And I know, you know, we're human, you know, that it takes, you know, quite a bit to show the same love for someone who's not actually a biological child or grandchild and is, you know. But those are things you have to work on. We'll take a break and we'll be right back.
It's hard to think about, but every year, millions of children are bought and sold. They are forced into prostitution or made to work at grueling, dangerous jobs with little or no pay. And thousands of these children live here. Yes, right here in the United States. I'm Angie Harmon, and I believe the number of children suffering this way should be 0. 5.5 million children are victims of forced labor and child trafficking all over the world. Their childhoods are being stolen. They work in exploitive, dangerous jobs, sell their bodies, miss out on an education, and live in servitude. To help these children, we must see them. Join us and learn how you can help end child trafficking. Believe in 0 exploited children, 0 abused children, 0 trafficked children. Visit UNICEFUSA.org to learn more.
He passed away last year. It was hard at first.